Hello and welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, and today our guest is rock cellist and songwriter Daniel DeJesus. Philadelphia native Daniel DeJesus has taken his instrument out of the concert hall into the world of alternative rock music. Daniel DeJesus, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. When we think of rock music, we generally think of people playing the guitar, the keyboard, the percussion. But you play the cello, and I wonder what it means and how it happened that you're a rock cellist.
Well, first, I'm not the only person who's doing this. There are quite a few other musicians all over the world. Probably the most famous would be the quartet Apocalyptica from Austria, who debuted a recital playing Metallica on 4 cellos. And Rasputina, who was very inspirational for me, trying to utilize the instrument as an instrument for songwriting, as opposed to just something added for accompaniment.
Okay, so did you start out playing the cello with the notion that you were going to do it the classical way, and then you were inspired by this group, or did you always know that you were going to do something different?
Well, how it occurred was I was really interested in songwriting, but my first instrument was the cello. And I believed that to be a songwriter, you had to play the guitar or play the piano. So I got a guitar, and I started playing it, and I started writing little songs in high school, and it was really a small project for myself. I was just writing for myself. And then I started to hear of other groups of these cellists who were doing this, and rock and cello kind of combination. And I thought, well, that sounds really interesting. I think I should probably do it. But it was really something that I kept to myself. It was not something that I was planning on taking on as a career.
I see. So you were originally, though, trained as a classical cellist?
Yes.
You played classical music. And then this gradually took off in another direction.
And yes, it did, in a very surprising way.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I've listened to your CD, From the Subconscious, and it's out, I guess this year is when it came out.
Yes, it debuted in, actually, this November, and it's available on CD Baby currently. I'm working right now on trying to get a more mass distribution right now.
Okay. Well, you'd never expected that you would record your music, from what I hear.
No.
So what caused you to make the CD, and do you intend to continue to make more?
Well, what got me to make the CD was I had an assignment in college because I went to the University of the Arts for illustration. And one of the assignments in my class was to create a CD cover, and I decided, well, I have this music that I've been making demos of, again, really for a small audience of friends and myself and family members, and I made a CD cover for it. And what I didn't know until I found out later was that I actually had to bring the CD so everybody could listen to it, and when I did that, people started coming up to me asking me for copies of it. Some people approached me saying, oh, are you doing this out? Do you play concerts and things like this? And I said, no, I don't do this at all. And apparently it was really well received, which was a big surprise to me because I really didn't think anybody would like it.
Really? So what initiated it was the cover that you did for a project?
Yeah.
So that brings us to my next question, which is that you're an artist as well as a musician.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that? You trained originally, or your training is in visual art as well as in music. Tell us about your art.
Well, I'm really lucky to have two parents who are very supportive, and they saw the interest in art that I had, and my father enrolled me into a school when I was in middle school because the current elementary school that I was attending was a private school, but they did not have funds to hire an art teacher. So my father decided to take it upon himself to get me to a community art center where I studied there. I went to the High School for Creative and Performing Arts for visual arts, then playing cello as well while I was there. And then in college, I went for illustration. I decided to really pursue the art, and I thought that that would really be my strong suit, something that I would probably be much better at than being a musician.
Is it something you feel now that you'll pursue as well, or do you think now you're shifting toward music?
I think they're now growing together. What's really happening is that I'm working right now in a nonprofit arts organization, and I'm working all the time on my painting, and I do illustration for the nonprofit organization I work for called Puertorriqueño. And
what kind of organization is it?
It's a nonprofit arts organization that focuses on Latin American culture.
Okay. Well, then your illustration must be, because your style has that quality to it. We've discussed that before you started talking here, that you have been influenced by Latin American artists.
Yes. After I left college, I was kind of hungry to learn about histories of art, and specifically histories of my own. Being a Puerto Rican, I didn't know any Puerto Rican artists, and I thought that was kind of sad. So I thought, well, maybe I should do some research, which led to many things, including my employment at Puertorriqueño. But it also led me to discover artists that I absolutely love, artists such as Remedios Varo, painters such as Lenora Carrington.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to project two of your paintings, so you could perhaps say a few words about them. Caribbean Eve, which I think is such a haunting, interesting painting. Could you explain a little bit about it?
Yes, that painting was part of an exhibition I had at the Puerto Rican Federal Affairs Administration office. They like to host art shows of local Latino artists. And this was a collection called Mensajes de la Tierra, which means messages of the earth. And it was really dealing with the story of Genesis and things that had to do with nature and the human body and these kinds of things. So this particular painting is actually owned now by Tomas Sanchez. He purchased the painting for his wife, and he really liked it because after I explained to him that this was Eve, the first woman of the earth, and in her hand she's holding the forbidden fruit, but as she's gazing at you, it's more of like it's very almost sensual-like, and everything around her is completely tropical. She's in this beautiful paradise, and in the banner on the bottom is the Bible verse talking about Eve, and she is really, for me, Eve in the Bible is really like Venus. The idea of beauty, the first woman, the first, beauty
you
to walk the
capture
earth.
that, I think, in that painting. There really is something very lush and dreamlike about it. The other painting we're going to show is The Weaver. Is there a story to that?
Yes. This was inspired by a painting by Remedios Varo that she created of this woman creating this, weaving this spool of thread, and it became an individual, and it kind of flew out of this this building, if you can imagine this. I decided to kind of pay a homage to her in this regard and kind of create my own image, which when I looked at that image, for me, that was a description of what it is to be an artist. You labor, you surround yourself in this smaller world away from other people, but what you create is that connection to everyone else.
Oh, that's wonderfully said.
This beautiful figure that comes out, and she touches this dove, which represents peace, represents some people of the Holy Spirit. So it's to a spiritual level, but also to a level that talks about the inside.
You call your art magical surrealism, or you say that you would characterize it that way?
Well, interestingly enough, I do now. At first I didn't. At first I thought to myself, I didn't really call myself a surrealist. I really call myself more of like a fantasy painter, a little more conceptual than character-driven. But some individuals had seen my work, and they were talking to me, and this one particular woman who had done, from community college, she had written an essay on magical surrealism, was just so intrigued by it, and I said to myself, well, I guess it is. It's magical.
I guess it's nice to have a little label to trot out if people need to have a quick description of your work.
It is a nice label because I believe it best describes in a very simple way what I'm interested in. It's magic and it's very surreal. It's not based on the real world.
Right. Well, I want to get back to your music, and I want you to talk a little bit about the Philadelphia alternative rock scene or independent music scene, which I guess you must know well. Do you play around the area?
I do play around the area. I have performed at the Grape Street, World Cafe Live, several other open mics. I've played in Feasterville, New Jersey, some private, some more public performances. And the alternative rock scene in Philadelphia, I think, is an incredibly talented music scene. I'm really happy to be a part of it. I kind of sort of was given a crash course into it because I grew up with musicians that were in the classical world and a little bit in the jazz world. I really knew nothing of it until I started working on my album and I started performing.
And then you began to know the people in the area. Who have been your influences? I guess I would like to know your influences in the classical music world, maybe even in jazz, as well as in rock.
Well, I think as a cellist, my biggest influence has been Jacqueline Dupre, who I saw a documentary on her, and it changed my life forever.
Why is that?
It changed my life because she was just so passionate about her instrument, but her talent was so much a part of her that it was her way of expressing herself in a manner that I had never seen before. It was so visual, and she'd bop her head around, and she'd move a lot, and, you know, this fluctuating movement could, I mean, some people found it very annoying, but to me, just the style of her playing and just listening to her and seeing how she, even herself was a little bit hesitant about pursuing a career as a musician, but discovered that it was really not something that was a career, but was really a part of her, you know, initially, instinctively.
And you feel that yourself?
I do, yes.
That's interesting. I mean, as a visual artist and a musician, I guess you would relate to someone whose whole body, visually as well as musically, expresses itself through the music.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of hers.
Who else has been an influence, or who do you admire?
I really admire musicians who are extremely creative, and that can be interpreted in many different ways.
Okay.
But to name a few, offhand, Beck, Tori Amos, was big Tori head for a long time.
Okay.
Bjork.
Interesting.
Most recently, Kronos String Quartet. I really admire a lot of the work that they do. Shostakovich.
What an eclectic mix.
Yeah,
it's
from a lot of different people, yeah.
Yeah, but you were telling me before, when we were talking about your artwork, that you love John Singer Sargent on the one hand, as well as the Latin American painters, so that's an interesting, you know, again, I guess like your classical and your rock combination, you span quite a range.
Well, I think what they all have in common is an emphasis on individualism. And I think what intrigues me the most is that I get this sense that what they produce is not something that is necessarily put out there for specific reasons. I guess the best way to explain it is that their craft chose them. And for me, that really shows. And because of that emphasis on that individualism, because for me they're so unique, I really draw from that. I really try to be more like very much a sponge, and I really consume a lot from these artists. So when there's an artist that really inspires me like that, I buy as many books as possible, or I go to the library, or I get all their albums, or
you immerse yourself, in other words.
Exactly, yeah.
Have you had music teachers that have been particularly influential for you? People who taught you maybe when you were quite young, that set you going in the direction you're going now?
That's funny. My first, because it's funny that you say, my first cello teacher, Tanya Murphy. She's a